Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Encounter. As always, I'm Josh Curry. With me is a great group, Christopher Gebauer.
Yep.
Peter Triezenberg.
Hello.
And with her debut on the podcast, Alana Hagues.
Hello.
So this month we're here to talk about NieR, the sometimes forgotten but always loved Xbox 360 and PS3 game.
Yay.
Yay.
Woo!
I'm not yaying.
That's fine. You don't have to be optimistic and joyous and all the rest of it. We'll do that for you.
Wonderful.
Josh hates everything confirmed.
Yeah, I hate life. So I actually had forgotten about this. During our pre-show, Peter was talking about how it's kind of a spin-off from the Drakengard games.
It's the same director, writer, Yako Taro, I think his name is, and who is, I'm convinced at this point, is some kind of mad genius, because everything he's worked on is completely insane, but also really interesting, and NieR is no exception.
Yeah, because you were saying this is basically a sequel to one of the endings, like one of the branch endings, correct?
Yep, in the very first Drakengard. Like one of the optional endings.
Which always, I find that type of stuff really interesting. Like, you have these series that, for all intents and purposes, either like died or like wasn't going well, and you have these directors that love the source material so much, they find like these wonderfully creative ways to like spin it into a new domain, like bring a new audience to it. And I'm guessing, but there's enough there that fans of like that individual can get so much more out of it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it doesn't make me want to go back and play that old game, but it makes me so much happier when I'm experiencing this game.
Nobody needs to go back and play the first Drakengard. You're good.
There you go.
See? Good. Confirmed. None of us should go do it. I like it. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
So, interesting enough, I think Peter... I don't think I know. Peter's the only one of us that has played this game before.
Fact.
Yep.
So, this is the first time through all of us. I kind of want to hear just, like, initial, just, like, knee-jerk reactions from everybody of what they thought of it. And let's start with Alana, since has a new voice for the podcast.
Oh god. Okay, right.
Spot.
Yeah, a little. First impressions were this. I tell you, this game is weird. This game is definitely off the ball, kind of not what you expect. I think. Well, actually, I'd not heard of it until last year. The first time I'd heard of it was probably about the time they announced the sequel, which is a little embarrassing. Yeah. So, and then I tracked it down and was like, oh. And then I realised I hadn't heard of it because it came out about the same time as another massive Square RPG came out. Final Fantasy 13.
Oh, that little old game?
That old game.
That game that launched
That
a million.
gem of a hidden title.
Hey, that game is wonderful.
Yeah.
Everything that... Can we talk about like everything that came out around that time? Like, Resonance of Fate came out like within the same week and like completely got ignored.
Oh,
I don't
really?
know, I picked up Resonance of Fate instead of NieR.
So, I know it's not necessarily the same quote-unquote genre, but we're talking about like gems at the same time that was forgotten, and in that fall of 2010 was Enslaved, Odyssey to the West.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, wonderful, wonderful game. If whoever's listening has not played that, it's definitely worthwhile picking up. I actually more so... I mean, we always talk about, like, technicalities of is this an RPG game and, like, what makes an RPG. Like, NieR falls... I don't know, it's a weird space, but I got so much... Like, I felt like this was in the same realm as Enslaved. Like, I saw a lot of parallels. I don't know.
Interesting.
And it's mainly because of the combat. And I know that.
Okay.
Okay.
But, like, I saw so much there that kind of reminded me it's kind of bleak. There's not a lot there in some of the regards, definitely when you're going through those plains. And that's kind of a time of the PS3 and Xbox 360 era where there's the computing power was there, but we didn't know how to use it yet. And we were trying to make these huge open worlds, but we didn't. Like, we were definitely weren't on the element of like being able to make something like a Dragon Age Inquisition or something like a fully fleshed world, or Witcher. But I kept like every time I played through it, I was like, oh, this is slaves. Like instead of little robots, I'm fighting these little wispy, fiery red things, and I don't know. I saw a lot of comparisons between the two. But let's go back to Alana talking about what she thought. Before I completely derail this.
That's no
Too
good
late.
interjection. Something we were talking about before we started the podcast was the beginning. So that's a really unusual beginning because it's slightly different. We were comparing it to Castlevania, the Symphony of the Night, where you get all your abilities and then you lose them. But in this one, you have to earn all of them still. So you start off fighting and you're level, like, you know something's wrong when you're going up like 4 levels in 30 seconds. You're like, hang on a minute, this is really strange. And then you get all these abilities and
you feel really cool.
Yeah, you get this like flash of being really cool, and then all of a sudden stuff happens, and and then it's really, I quite like that. It was done differently. It wasn't just like given everything. So
I really like it as an introduction to the story because you kind of get a feel for the main character and his like relationship with his daughter, which is kind of the driving force of the game's plot.
Yeah.
And it introduces both of the talking books, which, spoilers, this game is weird. There are talking books.
You don't have books that talk to you?
I can neither confirm nor deny that the books on my shelf whisper things into my ear.
Especially in the wee hours of the morning when studying, yeah.
So maybe I'm an idiot, but I didn't even realize it was 2 books until later in the story when there's like a plot moment where they talk about 2 separate books.
No, it's not clear. It's not made clear that like there's multiple.
Yeah,
right away.
The subtleties of the covers are very hard to miss in that opening sequence for the prologue. Like they look almost identical, and it almost feels like it's the same book speaking to both characters. Just weird. It could be. I don't know. The first time I played that prologue. I popped this in originally years ago, very late at night, and then about 2 years ago, and then did not keep playing it until we decided to make it a game for retro. But first time I thought it was just the insanity of this character imagining the book on both sides of the bookshelf within that.
Nope. It's just
it's exactly. But that's not the case. No, but I gotta say that it's pretty special how this game does so many elements, just so many crazy things, and you get introduced to just the combat in that prologue, and then you flash forward, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, and now here's everything else.
Yeah, so sounds like 3 people positive about the intro.
Oh yeah, I don't hate it. It lets you get a sense of the combat, and it introduces, like Peter says, the characters. The 2 characters.
And I already promised I promised I'm not going to talk any more about it, but there is plot important things in that scene.
So, before I say this, that there is a plot that's come back and they'll explain it, gives it a redeeming value. But at the point where we are right now, I think the prologue's utter garbage. Like, I really, really, really do not
really
like
don't
it.
like it. I
would have, if this wasn't for this podcast, I would have just taken the disc out. I wouldn't have snapped the disc, but I definitely wouldn't have played the disc again. And Alana brought up Castlevania, and specifically Symphony of the Night. The one thing, I think we talked about this on our recording too, that is so wonderful about that is you have all your abilities and whatever taken away, but you're a different character when you come back. And you, as a person, like, you have that, you see your little daughter, like, you know this. You eventually get a book, and it's like, why don't I already know this book? Like, and then there's time skips, so you assume this is time forward, but then why do I have to learn about a book again? It is massively confusing. The gameplay is actually not very great. It's more closer to a Genji game. Genji, right? Well, it's terrible, just hack and slash, just like, I'm going to kill 1,000 people with one swing of my sword.
Which makes sense given its lineage, because Drakengard is a Dynasty Warriors clone.
Thank you, Dynasty Warriors. That was what I was looking for. Which I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I do not like that series. I do not like that type of gameplay. I much prefer, if we're in a quote-unquote hack and slash, I'd like to have skill to the game. I'd like to be dodging, I'd like to be blocking, I'd like to be having combos. And
that does become more important later on.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it doesn't start on a good foot forward. Because as soon as you get into the regular game, even before you get your book back, you have to dodge, you have to block, you have to be smart. And it's not completely necessary, but that is an element of the game, and it's just kind of hidden there in that prologue, because you just sit there in a corner and you just mash away.
So you don't do what I do, which is like chug healing items every time you get hit, and just forget about dodging and blocking and generally playing well.
I play that I try to never have to use a healing item ever.
And I'll admit this straight up, I'm terrible at action games. I like real-time combat in games, but I generally am not very good at them, which is why I will never be able to beat the Souls games. I've already resigned myself to the fact that I'll never be able to beat Dark Souls. And it's and it's like in the case of NieR, it's like, well, this is not a particularly challenging game, but it still requires after a certain point, like enemies will hit you for like half your health bar unless you're blocking or dodging. And I'm just like, well, I've got this store of healing items I can use, and that tends to be how I play. It's not the most skillful way, but it works.
That's my only initial concern with the game. Once I got past that prologue, whatever, we'll ignore that for now. And you get into the actual gameplay, and you start to see, oh, I'm going to have this sword, I'm going to have to move around. And that's where Enslaved kind of comes to my mind, to a lesser extent, obviously, something like Devil May Cry, or God of War. Like, that type of gameplay is like immediately like a switch in my brain turns on, and that's how I'm going to play this game.
Right.
And so for me, then I don't want to use those healing items. I want to be going through and having as good of a quote unquote combo, or like dodging and whatnot. I want to hit that perfectly. And so I was much happier when I got out of that prologue, because that was the type of game it started moving more towards.
Fair enough.
That's where it just like beyond the wackiness, which is actually kind of interesting. It made zero sense.
Sure.
At least you guys did.
Well, yeah, I just feel like it serves its purpose. It introduces the core mechanics, even though very quickly, and you're just kind of testing out the different powers if you want to. And then it hints to the story, and then kind of, pulls the rug out by doing the time skip and then seeing the same characters again.
See, and I would argue it's a terrible tutorial. Because why then do I have to immediately after that go through the tutorials when I am no longer there? Why am I getting loot tutorials from killing enemies on how to do stuff? Why am I having to go to a tutorial on a menu to be able to watch something? Like,
that is a separate problem.
Yeah, so if you're going to have a section that is there to serve as a tutorial, when I get to the quote-unquote real game, let me play the real game.
Yeah, don't do it again.
And sure as hell don't make me kill an enemy to be able to get a loot tutorial. That's the most absurd thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, the loot drop tutorials are odd, and I don't think I saw half of them on my first playthrough. Like, a lot of this seemed entirely new to me.
Yeah, it's a little funky.
But that great game.
Yeah, it's super great.
It's super great. It just sucks.
Yeah, keep going, Alana.
Oh.
We're just going to use you to frame the whole episode. We'll have you slowly work out your first impression, and we'll use just tangents off of that for the whole episode. How's that sound?
Sounds good. I'll go with that. Well, actually, something we didn't mention with the prologue that goes on to like more of the main game, as you say, like the quote-unquote thing. The setting, it doesn't just set up the characters, it sets up a really interesting world. So you start off in what looks like a desolate modern-day city, and it's supposed to be summer, isn't it? And it's snowing.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you're thrust, it's about 1,300 years forward. And then it looks like your typical RPG desert town, beach town, kind of
fantasy.
Yeah, faux fantasy area. And I really like that. Like, I really like the world that NieR's got and NieR presents. And I love the library in the middle of your village. That's just like, it stands as a relic to this old world that's modern and stuff. And
it seems to be the only place of knowledge. And they still can't translate most of those books. They're just there.
Yeah.
That lends itself to a really interesting thing about NieR too, is that like that world is post-apocalyptic, and it's heading towards another apocalypse. Like, there's a plague running around, and like your daughter is sick and dying, and that's the kind of the main impetus for your quest is just to save her. And I don't know, I feel like it's a really interesting, like you said, a really interesting setup.
Yeah, like I love when the first time you go to Sea Town. Is it Sea Town?
Seaworth or whatever. Seaforth.
Something like that.
The sea town, wherever it is,
Yes.
with the beach. When you're standing on the beach and it's either old railway tracks or like motorway. There's in the middle of the ocean. It's just a really good snapshot of the world and.
In the main overworld is like the landmarks that are like overhead are like it's like a broken bridge. Like that's really cool.
That's right. Going to the junkyard, yeah, as well, yeah. But no, like the world of NieR is really, really interesting, and I really, really, as I'm about halfway through it, so like as I'm exploring through it, I'm really intrigued to find out like what happens. Why is it like this? Why is everything so primitive?
I'm going to be so fascinated to hear your guys' reaction to the ending.
There's definitely an element of mystique to it that is very interesting. And even with the pro, I bag on it, but it definitely adds to. There really is a what the hell moment because it's like I'm in this terrible place. There's buildings. Now I'm in the how did this all happen? Like everything around it is like this kind of mystery, and you're slowly trying to solve it. And then we were talking about with the books. You're like, well, there was 2 books. Was it 1 book? Did that book move? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there is 2 books. Well, how do they see both books? And it just slowly unravels. But while unraveling, there's still just so many more questions that are just being left unanswered. And then you do have this very interesting world to walk through.
Yeah. And the only thread we have are our 2 main characters and this thing called the books and the Black Scroll. That's it. Oh, shades, I guess.
Excuse me. His name is Grimoire Weiss, and you address him by his full
and proper title, yeah. The necessities.
The precursor to Mr. Drippy.
Yeah, exactly. Not as good as High Lord of the Fairies, though.
It
was a couple of years before it, so we'll cut him some slack.
And now I want a crossover game between NieR and Ni no Kuni.
Wow.
I'm just happy there's another Ni no Kuni. Can we just leave it at that?
It's enough.
I hope it's better than the first one.
We're not doing this again. We're not doing this
again.
Yeah,
we're not having this argument again.
So NieR.
Right, NieR.
We talk about the world. I think it is, because we also have this in our notes, but so how about those outfits in that futuristic world?
I cringed so hard when I saw Kaine. That's how her name's pronounced, right?
Kaine.
Okay, sure.
Okay, now here's the weird thing about Kaine is that like
wearing?
A negligee.
Before we move on to anything else, what is she wearing?
A negligee.
It's like a nightgown.
Yeah.
It's like half a nightgown, isn't it? And then like a pair of pants. And
it's not a pair of pants. It's half a pair of pants.
Okay.
At most, it's half a pair of pants. We're being nice.
So the weird thing about Kaine, and this is when they first announced the game, she was like one of the biggest talking points about this game because and this was a thing. This was a pre-release thing, so I'm not really treating it as a spoiler because she's a hermaphrodite.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah.
So
completely forgot about that.
The fact that she actually is one of the more well-written characters in the game, and she actually is really interesting. And when you replay the game after on New Game Plus, you get some more backstory on her, which is really, really quite poignant. But I think she's a really interesting character. But from a pure design standpoint, you look at that outfit and it's like, is this just designed for sex appeal, or what are you doing? And it's a good thing there's more to that character than that, because otherwise I would be totally with you. That is what the hell?
And that's the most disappointing part is we live in a very different era than 2010, and expectations of both male and female roles, and just what's appropriate, or considered appropriate, or just not considered lazy. But from the beginning, she's very fascinating, because at first, is she a shade? Is she doing magic? Why is she upset? She's the voice from the... I unfortunately, it took me, I talked about this on Twitter. I tried for about 2 weeks before I actually started the game, and the farthest I ever made it was turning it on, having the title screen. And she screams, she's the voice for that. So I've heard her voice a million times because that thing's always played in the background while I'm doing other things. I was like, oh, she's important. This is awesome. And then I looked at her, I was like, oh, come on. But that's, I think, the most disappointing part is she seems like a very interesting character. And it's obvious she's going to play a big role when you first meet her. And then to have it just, that is how she's going to look, which is fine. You can look like that. You do you. But you expect more. I guess is the best way to put it.
I think it's more to the point of it just unfortunately fits the kind of stereotype of objectified character for the hell of it, not for any true reason. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like you said, it's not even about a little bit of it. It's a different time, but even more so, it's just that it's just not necessary. It doesn't exactly, I think, destroy the game in any way, but it's just like, you could have. I understand that we're doing this whole thing where everyone's outfits look kind of tattered and piecemeal, but exactly. But that was my follow up. It's like, but then in a weird way, you go from, because there are other female NPCs that you'll see walking around that have as little on, but it's just it's more it looks a little bit closer to how NieR's outfit is, where it's just kind of, again, hodgepodge, whereas she is a very tailored character where it's clearly, sexualized.
Yeah, and they do very, very sexual camera angles.
Yep.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yep.
So
that's the standard.
Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that, the PR beforehand, and that's one of those things that's just been so long. But once you said that, Peter, like, I remember this whole thing. I remember people being upset.
And I think that's a big part of why the game did kind of middling critically, is because I don't think anyone knew what to make of NieR, and because like the game itself is this hodgepodge of like, you've got your Zelda overworld, you've got your God of War combat. There's a bunch of times in the game where it switches genres, kind of just to play around with the game. It turns into a text adventure at one point. Another point, it's a Resident Evil clone, and just and then you have the story, which is completely bonkers. It's really good, and thematically it's really interesting and all that, but it's so weird.
Yeah, and then sorry, go ahead, Alana.
I think the first part of the game, the story is quite normal, actually. Like, I think as you get towards the middle, it starts to change a little bit. Like, basically, the beginning of it is more like, I need to save my daughter. The talking book will help me save my daughter, but there's another talking book that I need to kill. They'll do something with. And then, as you get nearer to that, the middle bit, it starts to get a bit weird. Like, I think one of the most unusual bits for me was going into the Facade, the desert city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all the strange desert men. I really like Facade, but okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. Talking about world designs, I'll go back to that in a minute. But it's just I do really like the plot, actually, and I mean, it's really good. It's really simple, but it likes to drip feed you things, which is really nice, but it doesn't overwhelm you at any one time. So the first time you go to the junkyard, you get, maybe every time that you go into a new area, you get like a diary entry from your daughter, Yona. And then the first time you're going towards the junkyard, instead of it being white, you get a black book with something dated from like 2004 or 2005 or something like that. And it's just a kind of like, what's this? It's like it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But it drip feeds it. So you get a bit more later on, and it gets really, really fascinating. Like, there's something about 2005 or whenever it was.
Or 2045 or whatever that year was.
Yeah, there's one for 2045 as well, isn't there? And it never, like, overwhelms you with the bamboozledness of everything. It's quite good at mediating it. So although it's all crazy and zany, like, it's easy to digest.
Yeah, they keep it on the back burner, and they incentivize the exploration and doing side quests and all the rest of it, and that will give you little bits of information about the characters you're meeting, like Popola and Devila and all the rest of it. But it's, to your point, Alana, it's at your own pace. You engage with it bit by bit, and then the game also gives it to you in these little pieces and lets you kind of start putting things together on your own, which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not gonna lie, the journal entries made me very nervous, though. I have
it's
famously
not
on this podcast talked about how much I hate Lost Odyssey, and so I saw the journal entries. I was like, oh no.
Oh,
Speaking of a conversation we're not going to bring up again.
Yeah, maybe not.
So I saw. I was like, no, come on. This game has to have some redeeming quality. Come on.
Now, Josh, I will say that some of the Forest of Dreams sections is the part where it turns text based briefly. is very similar to Lost Odyssey in that it is a lot of poetic prose at times. But I think those sequences, I think you'll like them a bit more because A, they're interactive. There's a certain amount of fourth wall breaking humor they use in a lot of them. And two, at the same time, they're more plot relevant. Like, as in, like, the game's ties to Drakengard. The only time it's ever explicitly stated is in one of those sections.
Yeah, I'm more interested in that than I am just reading a diary entry, so that should be fine.
Those text-based adventures were really good. They're like your own adventure books. I really like those bits in NieR. But I tell you what, I did die.
I died too.
I was really surprised. I was reading along. I was just like, my way through, and then all of a sudden I died, and I was like, wait.
Yeah, they weren't kidding when they said that you had to get out of that like floating capsule in time. You don't have time to. You have to remember where you're going.
Yeah, I figured that out after I died like 3 times.
Yeah, right. Slowly piecing it together.
Yeah.
That part's pretty crazy. And then you go back there during the second half, and there's more like little stories that they tell, which I think is a lot of fun. But
I think that type of device to tell a story is fine. It's when we've gotten to the point. BioShock made diaries famous that they can read to you while you're actually playing, and so to have somebody stop and just actively read for them. A majority of the time, I think, is a waste of how you're interacting with the game. I think there's better ways you can give that story out to the character or the player. But at least with this, where it is interacting, there is choice, there is a gameplay element to it, there's a motivation with the gameplay. I think that makes it completely fine.
So, in the Japanese version of NieR 2, this is something interesting, is that there are 2 versions in Japan called Replicant and Gestalt. And Replicant was PS3 exclusive, Gestalt was 360 exclusive.
Yes.
Gestalt is the one we got that had old man NieR and his daughter. But in the other version, it's like young NieR, and he's trying to save his sister. And that was another part of the controversy that was surrounding this game, because I think there was some impression that we were getting gypped, like they had somehow designed old man NieR's game to appeal more to Western audiences, whereas and it changes the relationship between Yona and NieR, and also the relationship with Kaine, because when you have a young male character versus kind of an older one,
it becomes more of a romantic relationship instead of friends.
Yeah, which is weird. But honestly, I feel like the version we got is the better of the two. Like, because and this is just my own personal opinion, I like the father-daughter relationship. I think it provides a really good emotional impetus to continue on with this story. It's what drives the main character's quest consistently. It plays into a major theme of the story. And honestly, I don't feel like I feel like a brother-sister relationship would not be as effective.
I feel really bad for your sisters. You have sisters, plural, right?
I know I have one.
Oh, because you basically just admitted that you'd go on a grand quest for your eventual child, but you would never for your sister.
My sister can handle herself.
You're just like, she's going to take care of me, damn it.
I don't care that you have some black scroll disease crawling across your skin. Figure it out.
We're siblings. It's not how this I care for you thing works.
If you're listening to this, Julia, I'm sorry.
No, I get what you were saying. There's a protective element when you have a child.
Yeah.
I do think. I think at its core, a person's willing to do more or less anything to make sure that their child's safe or okay. So I agree. I think it serves as a much better driving force to propel you through the story. Definitely when you think of how long they've possibly been going through this when you think of the time skip, it's like, well, I've been at this for a while. At some point, you're like, you know what, sis? I'm sorry, I'm tired. I gotta go do something else. But also, why isn't that little girl grown up?
I can't talk about that.
But why would she be grown up? Just because of the time skip?
This time skip of like 1,000 years.
Because it's probably a reincarnation thing, Josh.
Because plot, Josh.
The only thing I can think of is that like they both sold their souls to the books, and so they're stuck like that forever.
But I will.
I mean, that's possible.
I will say that I'm also glad it's not a brother-sister relationship, because after Drakengard 1, I don't trust Yoko Taro with siblings. That was some Hamlet and Ophelia stuff going on there.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I loved that because that was such a hyper specific detail that like 10 people who are going to listen to be like, I got it. Yeah,
I understand.
Exactly. That totally went over my head. I was like, okay.
Sure. Yeah, although Drakengard 1 also had a cannibalistic child molester in it, so...
Wow.
Only up from
Drakengard 1 is messed up.
So NieR's pretty tame then.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Comparatively, NieR is like...
Big win.
Yeah, originally when Alana said, hey, the beginning of NieR, it's pretty normal, and I was like, there's talking books. This is not normal. If this is normal, we have to talk off the podcast. But now listening to Drakengard 1, it's like, yeah, this is all right.
By Yoko Taro standards, this is normal.
It is the simplest it could be. Okay.
So getting back to NieR, I think we kind of talked about a little bit of the combat, a little bit of the prologue, and like the world. We haven't really talked about what we're doing in it though. And one of the things that I found at least disappointing with the beginning and kind of the whole, it seems like the framework of most of the game is it's a glorified fetch quest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the side quests are just variations on
there's
the exact same fetch quest.
There's a lot of backtracking to the same areas to run errands for people if you decide to do the side quests.
And so, I mean, the classic one for this is I always think of Mass Effect 2. And I love that game, but the world's supposed to be ending, and all of a sudden it's like, yo, Jack, let's go do this loyalty quest for you. Instead of just like finishing the game.
It's kind of an RPG trope, though. I mean, meteors hanging in the sky. Let's go to the gold saucer.
Yeah. I don't know. It seemed kind of weird because like there is that my daughter's dying possibly, you know. And so it seems more important than like, hey, let's go get a fish. At least the fish is supposed to protect her. But
now,
like,
to be fair though, I do like kind of how they frame it, because the idea is that NieR's like the village handyman, and he's trying to earn money to care for Yona,
her and his life.
Yeah.
So it kind of adds a little bit of context to those side quests. Like it's not like 100% like locked down, but it kind of makes more sense as to why he'd be doing odd jobs than your typical like RPG protagonist.
Totally.
I absolutely
But there's only
agree.
so many times I want to get 10 mutton.
Yeah.
Fishing.
There's a trophy for killing sheep.
I agree until you find out that there's a dark book. And I feel like as a parent at that point, you're like, you know what? Screw you guys. Screw your sheep. I'm going on a quest to kill this book.
Yeah, but now we're getting into a Fallout 4 paradox of like, you want to get your son. There's a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
I guess NieR feels like a duty to the village, though, doesn't he? Because doesn't he say that I don't want to leave everybody, and then Popula's like, no, you need to do what you need to do, and then
take care of yourself. Stop worrying about everyone else.
He's almost like a goodwill case. It seems like, where he's kind of taking the charity of the town, and so he feels like he has to return it by doing these actions.
Yeah.
That's why he feels obligated to help that old woman, even though the book early on is just like, Weiss is just telling him, leave this crazy lighthouse.
Oh, you mean the lighthouse?
The lighthouse lady.
Yeah.
That quest is great. It really is.
It's a very good quest. What did everyone pick to do? If everyone's done it.
I chose not to tell her.
Yeah, I chose not to tell her.
I chose not to tell her. Give her something.
Oh, we're all really good people. I think
if you do tell her, she accepts it and tells you not to tell anyone that she knows. I think
just to keep it the. Now, how about with the kids in the junkyard? Did you, or at the heap? Did you tell Jacob?
I told them the truth.
Yeah, I did too.
That situation.
I did the truth. Yeah.
So I was curious. Do you lie in both situations? Apparently, none of us did.
that junkyard sequence becomes completely nightmarish. I'm sorry, I keep getting ahead on this game. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like remembering having done. Like it's been like 4 years since I last played this game.
But it's coming to you in flashes.
And I'm just like,
junkyard.
Oh god, the junkyard! No, that is like the most nightmare fuelish scene in like the whole game.
Oh no!
Oh god, I'm just coming up to that bit.
On the second half.
Yeah, on the second half.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Great.
Get excited.
That's
Get excited.
No, wait.
Yeah.
Be excited.
Next time we get to the podcast, you can be like, "What were you talking about? It wasn't that bad." And I'm just like,
Okay, but yeah, on the issue of side quests, like there's and travel, like it takes forever to go everywhere.
Yeah.
It helps that the world is not very big. Like it is a very these are very condensed zones.
They seem bigger than they actually are.
But it's very bland and very open.
Yeah, very. But
like
yeah,
that central overworld is just. I was just saying that central overworld is just a green field with sheep.
Yeah.
And like that takes twice as long to cross as it should, until you tame the boar, which you can tame a boar and ride around on that. But that doesn't solve all your problems.
But even then, it's still not the cleanest way of getting around. It's definitely faster.
Yeah, no, because the boar is like really hard to steer and it will crash into things.
Pretty much, you have a slight variance of straight at a very high speed, and then otherwise it's a trot.
Although I found out that you could drift on the boar like a racing game, and that was really funny.
You can drift on the boar?
Yeah,
it is Tokyo Boar Drift.
I was about to make that joke. Come on, Chris. Damn it.
Fast and the Furious. NieR.
Fast and Laborious.
Oh, that was actually okay.
So I agree with kind of moving around, but I enjoyed that whenever you move to a new area that you don't have a map for that area. And I liked that it doesn't fill in by moving around. You actually have to actually find a map.
Yeah, or you just wander around aimlessly.
Yeah, I think it's, for gameplay, terrible because it's frustrating. Because you just want to pull up your map, like, where I'm supposed to go.
But you have no idea where you are.
It was one of those odd twists to kind of adding realism to a game. Because usually it's any type of realism you add to a game is usually worse for the player. But it was one of those just like little things. It's like, oh, I enjoyed that. But yeah, it sucks because I was really happy about it that I finally got to. It was when I first got to Aerie. Is that how we're pronouncing that place?
I think so. The area.
The area. Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is confusing. There's just stairs or ladders and these huge bridges. Let's pull up this map. That'll make it so much easier. And I was like, oh, that's right. I was so happy about this an hour ago.
It seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, but overall, I actually thought that was a nice kind of twist to it. Makes moving around slowly not so terrible or extra terrible because you don't know where you're going.
You have no idea where you're going.
Catch-22 on that one.
Yeah. And the X on the map will look like you have to go north, and it turns out you have to go east to get to north or something random like that.
Every one of those is there's a direction, and at the last second, it has this small curve in one direction that you have to make it in a direction that's not the X to be able to get to it every time.
Mm-hmm.
Every single entrance and exit, it doesn't line up with where you're supposed to be going.
That's because they care.
I take back my map comment. Screw this game.
Slowly, the hatred.
We're making progress.
I will say that NieR kind of makes up for its budget issues because it's a pretty low budget game for a mid last gen game. It's like compared to what came out that year. If you look at like FF13, it is obviously, but like even Resonance or White Knight Chronicles both probably looked way better than NieR does. But it makes up for it with some pretty creative like area design. Like the area is a weird labyrinth of like, you know, ladders and stairs and this one side scrolly bit, and then like, and our art direction too is something the game does really well. It makes up for it the fact that they didn't have a lot of money to throw at it.
That's what I was gonna say. Is art direction, but even more so than that, the game kind of bleeds character.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, it does.
It is a sum of its parts game.
I hate that phrase.
Yeah, but it's true because again, I think
it really does apply here.
Yeah, you know, we were talking earlier about how, you know, the sequel is being handled by Platinum, and it's really hard. at least for me, and I'm a big Devil May Cry fan and certain other stylish action games. The whole time I want it to be cleaner.
Yes.
I want the square, the comboing off of square to be a little bit quicker. There's enough of a hitch at the end of a combo before being able to start over again. A lot of the elements of this game, and there's so many, whether it be the shifting perspective from 3D to 2D, this game doesn't do any of those individual characteristics better than other titles. It's okay to good at a lot of these different things, and that's why I say it's a sum of its parts, because it has a lot of ideas. This is a game that is packed with ideas, and they just don't all land. But I love the fact that it tried, and to your comment about character, it gives it so much personality that it's doing all these different things and trying to manipulate and shift how you, the player, see everything and approach the gameplay itself, which I love.
So you brought up sum of all parts and kind of doesn't all come together, but brilliant ideas. Would you then make the argument that this game was very forward-thinking, kind of ahead of its time, or would you say?
I think that's why it still has a following, and why people still talk about this game, whether if it's just through its soundtrack or you go to undiscovered gems or cult hits, and this is one of those games with Vanquish and others where people say not enough people played it. Go back and play it. People didn't play Vanquish.
I just love that was your call out was for Vanquish.
Oh, that's an underselling. Everyone should have played game from the last generation.
So
Vanquish is awesome.
So first of all, just ahead of its time, I think the natural sequel to this, and I'm interested to see what people think of this. I think the spiritual successor to this is Kingdoms Amalur. I feel like you take that open world kind of RPG-ness, that combat style, and you put it in a fuller world.
But one's a Western RPG in terms of it's trying to do more of Elder Scrolls, but with fun combat.
Yeah, plus...
That was kind of my natural... That's where I felt like was the next step.
Interesting. I mean, I see a lot of... For different pieces of this game, I see different stuff. Like I said before, in terms of shifting between 3D and 2D, I kept thinking of El Shaddai. But when it comes to... I mean, I guess, especially with Amalur and how its quest system works. It's a lot of the same kind of fetch stuff.
For me,
just give me 10 of this item. But
for me, it kind of reminds me of and I made this for Terra Enigma for different reasons, but Dark Cloud, the first one, because Dark Cloud 1, and especially when you compare it to NieR 2 coming out, Dark Cloud 2 is by and large, I think, considered the good one. But Dark Cloud 1 is a really interesting game where it doesn't do anything individually all that great. Like, translation's rough. Yeah, translation's rough, it looks rough, it plays rough. It's like, but when you play it all together, it's just like, this is kind of fun and interesting. And I think that's what NieR reminds me of, where it's like, it doesn't do anything individually great except music and story. But...
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
but it keeps you interested the whole way through.
Yeah, with its gameplay is this really kind of just interesting amalgamation.
Yeah.
Word of the day.
Yeah. Amalgamation. Yes. Good.
Definitely.
I think NieR strikes me for two regards. One, I'm excited to see what they could do with a bigger budget, more time, a bigger team. First of all.
Mm-hmm.
But my second one is, and this is more melancholy, I guess, way to look at it. I'm sad that we've moved into the generation of an Xbox One, PS4, where we've lost this middle tier of games.
Mm-hmm.
Where we used to have all the indies, like, this is definitely a middle tier. This is not a AAA title, and then you had the AAA. Like, this is where, I'm blanking on all the studios that closed, but every studio that closed in the last, 6 years because they couldn't handle, the big switch over, a THQ game. Perfect example.
Including this developer, the developer of NieR, Cavia.
Cavia, gone.
I mean, and you look at these titles, whatever you want to say, like I can complain about the combat not being good as the X game or whatever, or the
Yeah, sure.
graphics don't look as good as this. And you bring up that some of the parts. The brilliant thing about that era was it was so easy to. It wasn't that easy, but it was so easy to make a game, and that everybody was able to come in, and then you had this just like massive amounts of creativity that was brought to video games. And
Well, yeah, we've
completely lost that now.
Yeah, you have the last elements of, because this was 2010, so it's only a few years into that console cycle. PS3 and Xbox 360 together. It's 3-4 years in at that point, and you're still going from the PS2 era of things are more affordable, so you can kind of play around with wacky ideas, just like you could on PlayStation 1 and Xbox and GameCube. You could do weird games in that previous generation because it didn't exactly cost Wrath of God money to just make a standard release. And then you're beginning to have, like the Enslaved games we were talking about earlier, those mid-tier don't need to sell 10 million copies or 5 million copies to become a huge hit.
Yeah.
Slowly get phased out because you need to make the money. You can't take the risk. And now you get, like, NieR Automatic, I'm excited for, but I think it's actually going to be a lot smaller. I don't think it's going to be a big game. I think it's going to be a little bit more arena combat. Zone to zone stylish action, and it's going to oversimplify and focus on the combat. And I'm excited for it, but I think it's going to be a lot different than what we're playing through right now.
I'm going to be that guy and call officially right now that the next NieR is going to be a massive disappointment.
Probably. Especially because Platinum's last 3 kind of smaller games have not been good.
I love some of Platinum's games, but they have not had a very good track record as they've taken on more projects.
Yeah,
and
the Avatar game is awful.
Yeah, while they've worked on this project, they've pumped out a bunch of crap.
Yep.
And so it makes me very nervous the level of polish that they're putting into this. And
I'm still hopeful.
You can say whatever you want about this NieR. This was a passion project. And you can tell that this meant a lot to the group. And they did the best they could with what they had. And while the reason it drips with character is because it meant so much to them. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you can feel the effort on this game.
And I think that's going to be absolutely missed. So a majority of the reasons of why people liked this are going to be gone.
But they have the same composers, so good soundtrack.
Hey, there we go.
But they don't have the same lyricist, which is a bit of a bummer because she's fantastic.
There she is.
You can't have everything, Peter.
Yeah, apparently,
I know.
Apparently, even when I get optimistic, I gotta get shot down.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm slowly corrupting Peter so that he looks at everything terribly.
There are things I could complain about right now, but for Drakengard 3 they got Keiichi Okabe, the composer, and Emmy Evans back, so that soundtrack is really good, and it's really different from NieR's too.
Woo-woo.
So just total aside, Drakengard 3 is, speaking of weird, that game is weird. That game is weird. That game is it's not the tamest of the Drakengard games by any stretch, but it's
still probably a little bit easier than the cannibalizing child.
It doesn't have that, and it's not as boring as Drakengard 2 is. So it's kind of this weird middle ground.
Nice.
And you can download Kaine costume DLC and dress the main character of Drakengard 2 like Drakengard 3. I mean,
perfect.
I love that kind of useless throw in.
And it
changes a pre-order from GameStop.
No, it's like 99% download, and it changes.
It's $2.99.
Something like that. I don't know. It adds her kind of musical track in there. You can also have Emil's head on the dragon.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's horrifying and kind of hilarious.
It's so weird.
Some weird Falcor situation. So how about with the boss battles with those wonderful, you gotta destroy the circle in an amount of time
I
or
hate that
all
mechanic.
health comes back.
I hate that mechanic, and I really like Hammer, and I hate that mechanic.
I'm gonna sum up my feelings of this very concisely. At first, I couldn't beat the prologue because I thought you had to do something special with those circles. So I would get the circle every time, and I felt like I had to do some sort of crazy magic to get into the circle.
And you missed it in some tutorial, and you were trying to figure it out.
And so it took me the longest time, and I finally got mad, and I was just mashing buttons. I was like, oh, I win. Okay. And then when I fought whatever that dragonish thing when you first meet Kaine, every single
the big
time
lizard, yeah.
the right foot, like we would get the little circle thing, and then
it would walk up the hill. Or,
it had to have happened 8, 9, 10 times.
Yeah, that happened a lot to me.
And so finally I was like, all right, well, I should get to a certain point, and I just stopped trying in the fight. Like, I wouldn't do anything. And then eventually Kaine would kind of get it to work, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm standing right here. That's how I beat it.
Dark Lance, of the magic, all the magic spells that you learn in this game, Dark Lance, like, which is one of the first ones you get, is the one that stays. It stays useful for most of the game.
Yeah, it's very good. It's for that boss battle in particular, where I think it's a lizard kind of thing. It's really good for that, and for the one in the desert temple. Is it the desert temple where it's the cubes? Yeah, it's really useful. Yes. And the one in your village, actually.
All the battles.
Yeah, that boss too.
All of them.
Yeah, pretty much every battle. It's what I use.
It's weird too, because a lot of the spells are not that good. Like, there's a couple of them that I like, but most of them you do not like. The Dark Lance is the only one that's critical.
Yeah, I go Dark Lance in hand.
Like, does anyone use the one that absorbs magic?
No.
Is that ever useful? No, that's what I thought.
And I'm sure there's some example that if you looked online where someone would explain why it is the most useful thing, but I just don't see why you would need it. Worst case scenario, you just back off, wait, and then use Dark Lance again.
Roll everywhere.
Yeah,
Rolling solves every problem.
Agreed.
It really does.
Roll around.
Stop, drop, and roll.
If you can't roll, you double jump. If I could double jump and roll in the air, it'd be perfect.
If only you could jump and actually do action moves in the air.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
This screwed me up the first time I played it, and I forgot about it again this time. But I forget that you could double jump, so that first block pushing puzzle annoyed the hell out of me. Because you have to double jump onto the ledge, and I didn't realize you could double jump.
No.
Mine was worse because it was traveling to that location, and you had it turn to the side, side scroller, and you get to that first jump, and you have to double jump across that. I think I fell in the pit 7 times.
Yeah.
Oh no!
And I was like, "What is wrong with this game? I'm timing it perfectly." And you jump and you bounce off the edge. I'm like, "Oh, come on!"
When in doubt, Google it, and the first thing that comes up is double jump.
No.
And I was just like,
when in doubt, get angry and mash buttons, and you accidentally double jump over it.
See, the problem with the mashing buttons technique is I tried that for fishing, and it didn't work. And then I finally understood the timing on fishing.
Fishing, it doesn't matter, because eventually they just give you the fish.
Yeah, it's true. You just go buy it.
It's like, we're sorry that you're an idiot. Here's a fish.
But if you want to do the side quests that require fishing, then oh man, you are in for a world of not fun.
Yeah, I finally figured out the timing of it, but that annoyed me to no end. That you basically have to go X, then pull back. If you pull back at the same time as you hit X, you just automatically lose the fish.
And it's really hard to see that when the fishing rod is bending because
it's always shiny and sunny and happy.
And if you're behind it, it's such a thin line that it kind of blurs out of existence, so you can't even see it. So you have to kind of position the camera weirdly, which throws off your controls.
Yep.
Yeah. That minigame is just horribly designed.
Just a joy to catch a sardine.
But at the same time, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of a throwback to old game design where you had that grab bag of weird minigames that just were this functionally serves no real purpose, but it's there.
It's very Japanese.
And let's be honest, it's a Japanese RPG. You need fishing.
Yeah.
You need to fish at some point.
Yeah.
You just give you a fish, but it's better to just teach you how to fish.
It's like
the bylaw in the Constitution of Game Design.
They got a tax break back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Every time you include a mini game with fishing.
Are you training the populace on how to fish? Okay, tax break.
Tax break.
You're turning them into usable members of society.
Thank you, games. You have done something this day.
When they eventually get off their couch, the first thing they'll do is go to the ocean and catch a fish.
They will fish. Because when they need fresh air, the ocean is where they'll head.
That's always the go-to. Yeah.
I like that alternate universe where there are tax breaks for what mini games exist in a video game. So MMOs are. That's why they can just keep existing, because they're teaching everyone different jobs.
At this point, the government's paying them.
Yeah, that's really why Final Fantasy XIV is such a success.
Yeah. Well,
all those
blacksmiths.
A while
though. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal.
Did take a while. Yeah.
It did. Yeah.
Just trying to get those tax breaks.
Yeah. All about those tax breaks.
All about those tax breaks.
On that note,
that wonderful note.
I think that's going to do it for us.
What ending?
And it's strange. I like it.
Realistically, where do we go from there?
Now that we've all brainwashed you, please, after you've reviewed us on iTunes and given us that 5-star review, please leave your house and go fish. While fishing, please restart the podcast and listen again.
Okay, exactly.
Maybe play NieR.
Yeah, you should. I think
they should be out fishing. We just agreed on this.
Multitasking, Josh.
That's a lot of work.
Fish aren't fish.
You bring a TV and a portable generator out onto your boat.
And then you just drop the generator in the water and all the fish die. You can catch all of them.
Yeah.
Also
problem solved.
Boom. Done. Then we just got a tax break for teaching people how to fish.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Triple
government.
style.
But in all honesty, that is
check too.
that is going to do it for us here. Small housekeeping. When we roll into next month, so for April, we are going to be playing Through the World Ends With You.
Woot.
Actually, honestly, legitimately, any other word I could throw in the front there, one of my favorite games of all time. I have 3 people that have never played it on that podcast with me. I'm very, very excited to brainwash all of them to agree that it's the best game ever. But yeah, in the meantime, you guys can send your emails to retro@rpgfan.com. You can head over to the boards at rpgfan.com and say whatever you think about this or whatever you think about fish or tax breaks, and we will sadly read all of those and most likely respond. Most likely will be Peter, because Peter's amazing. And then, like I said earlier, please go onto iTunes. Please give us a 5-star review. Please leave a comment. It makes a big deal, and so that
love us.
We'll find the podcast. As always, thank you for listening. We'll be back shortly with the conclusion of
Bye.
Bye, friends.
Bye.